Welcome to the Top of Mind podcast from Altos Research. This is the show where we talk to real estate industry insiders and experts about the trends shaping the market today. Enjoy the show. Mike Simonsen here. Thanks for joining me today. Welcome to the Top of Mind podcast. This is where I talk to the smartest leaders, thinkers, and doers in the real estate industry. For a few years now, we've been sharing the latest market data every week in our Altos weekly video series. With the Top of Mind podcast, we're looking to add context to the discussion about what's happening in the market from the leaders in the industry. Every week, of course, Altos Research tracks every home for sale in the country, all the pricing, all the supply and demand, all the changes in that data, and we make it available to you before you see it in the traditional channels. People desperately need to know what's happening right now in the housing market. And the market was so frozen solid last fall. And then suddenly the landscape is changing. Everybody's worried about what happens in 2023. So you need to communicate about this market to your clients. Then you should go to altosresearch.com and just book a free consult with our team. We're going to talk about Miami today and South Florida and a lot of those related things. But of course, Altos covers every zip code in the country. So go to Altos and join us. So speaking of Miami and experts and people who use data, I've got a fantastic guest today, Ines Hegedus-Garcia. Ines is the current chair of the Miami Association of Realtors. She's also a very successful realtor in Miami, an EVP at Avanti Way Realty. Ines is at the forefront of real estate technology. She's a longtime publisher of the absolutely fabulous real estate blog, Miamiism.com, which is really, it's great, features the architectural spirit of South Florida. Really terrific work there. She's a frequent speaker at conferences around the world and has been a good friend and Altos client for many years. So I can't wait to talk about Miami and all the interesting trends there. Miami is a very special real estate market in the US. So plus we're going to get some insights from Ines on social media and her work with her blog and photography as well. So Ines, welcome to the podcast.
Wow, what a welcome. That was fantastic. Thank you. I'm going to hire you and go around the world with Mike. So
I'll introduce you on stage anywhere you like.
That was great.
Well, let's start with you and your background. You've been a realtor and broker in Miami for a long time. You're an architect by training. Right. So tell us the Ines story.
Listen, I would have never in a million years thought of becoming a realtor. That was not in my plans. You know, like you put your plans on paper, realtor and selling real estate was definitely not part of that. Now, that's the beauty of this industry, right? It's so organic. And then now when you start talking about agents, it's like what agent really planned to become a realtor from the first day in their career plans? So based on that, I was doing architecture. I was being an architect. I was designing both commercial and residential projects. And as a fluke, a family member actually bought a commercial property. They buy this commercial property and they say, Ines, we need you to manage it. And I was like, what? What do I know about managing a commercial property? Now, you know my husband, you know Rick. Rick is an accountant. My uncle said, Ines, for God's sakes, it's not rocket science. You do all the people stuff. Rick does all the financial stuff. Should be cake. Now, it was really fun because being an architect and being able to call a roofer and climb the roof and say, wait, you're not doing this right, or the AC or whatever it was that we were hiring, was the fun part. Now, we lost the opportunity to make some really big commissions by not being realtors, by not having our licenses. We were just managing this commercial building. And Rick said, I'm getting my license. And I said, that's a great idea. I still had like no intentions ever of doing that. We blinked, and from that one building, all of a sudden we were managing 20. It was just crazy. And then all of a sudden it was like, wait a minute, we are definitely losing opportunity. I got my license as well. Now, once I get my license, then I realized, wait a minute, residential real estate and architecture really go hand in hand. And not only that, I was making more money as a realtor than I was as an architect. Pretty sad. I know, it's crazy to even think about that. So it just was very organic. And I just, doors open and you choose to go through them or you choose not to. I choose to go through them. And so organically enough, my profession as a realtor and getting involved in leadership and everything has just happened. And it's been a really great ride, and it continues to be a fantastic ride. So that's pretty much my story.
That's a great story. And leadership is really an interesting part of that story. So let's go there for a second. You are currently the chair of the Miami Association of Realtors. You've done a lot of NAR things and Florida Association. Tell me about the current role.
Well, listen, this is my biggest achievement, and I know it sounds cliche, but I'm so honored to be leading the largest local realtor association in the country. We have over 60,000 members. Miami is larger than 45 state associations. So it's nuts. It's crazy. And so it's a challenge. It's a challenge I'm just taking on full force. It's super exciting, and and it's not a me thing, which is the beauty of leadership. The team is just so fantastic. Everyone involved, the rest of the leaders in the association, the staff, our CEO. So it's just, listen, it's February. So I've been chair for 2 months, and I just can't wait. I mean, the year is going to go by fast.
Yeah, that's great. And so 60,000 realtor members is, let's talk about them for a sec. Is that, so, now in 2023, we had crazy pandemic, that number probably grew during the pandemic. Is that true? Like,
Yes, yes, yes,
yeah,
yes.
like by a lot.
It actually grew by a lot. All the people that are being laid off and they were sitting home, a lot of people just decided to get their real estate license. In Miami specifically, we had a lot of people from the hospitality industry get their licenses. And it was great because they really understand working with people and working with the consumer at the right level. So yes, I think we can say that numbers don't really reflect, what happens in the industry with sales, but it's nice to have that 60,000 number behind us.
Yeah. And so then does that shrink this year? Now it's a much more challenging market.
You know what's funny? We were just talking about that in our meeting yesterday. There's a couple of media channels that are reporting a big drop in agent count. We haven't seen that. We haven't seen that at all. Our number count continues to increase, continues to grow. I can't tell you, I don't know the data off my head of how many agents get their licenses on a daily basis, but it's in Florida. It's a big deal.
It's a big deal. So that's interesting that it hasn't changed yet. There's always complaints in the industry that we have too many agents, and there's 1.5 million agents, and there's only 5 million home sales. Therefore, and I have a hypothesis that says, because it's relatively easy to start and end your real estate career, we actually always have the exact right number of them. It's an efficient market
I like
for
it.
when there's more sales with more money, there's more people going after it, and that's good competition. Like, that is as efficient as it gets. So it's interesting, though, to hear that it actually hasn't declined yet. It's, in much of the country, the second half of 2022 was really hard. How did you feel it in Miami?
I'm going to tell you something. I think Miami continues to defy all the odds. It's really incredible when I look, especially at your data, at what the rest of the country is doing, and our numbers continue to increase and increase, and we're still in an appreciating market, and we're not seeing the craziness of the rest of the country, and there's many reasons for that. We have a lot of foreign nationals that buy in Miami. So there's a huge, and for example, when the mortgage rates were affecting the market, our market has a lot of cash coming in. So those mortgage rates are not affecting our market as much as in other parts of the country. So it's definitely a different, our weather. I mean, we can talk about everything that's great about Miami, what makes Miami different, but it's just, it really continues to defeat the odds in every which way. And one
Yeah.
fun one, during the pandemic, when the world and the, closed down and we didn't have travel, I remember my agents were freaking out. We were thinking, oh my God, you know, we don't have our foreign national buyers. What's going to happen to the Miami market? We expected collapse. And guess what? Your people from California started coming in, and all the New Yorkers. And they said, if we have stay at home orders, we better be in a pretty place.
Yeah.
And a place that's fun and a place that's open and has diverse culture and great weather and all the great stuff. So we actually, the market was really, really positive during the pandemic. We never saw a downside. And then borders opened again after COVID. And we have Californians, New Yorkers, South Americans, and Europeans. So it's good to be us.
That's really, yes, it is. And it's a really fascinating. So the we can see, for example, the Central Florida markets have definitely slowed down from their pandemic peaks, although not as big. They haven't slowed as big as the Western US, the Boise and Phoenix and Austin's. Those hit the brakes much harder. So the Central Florida markets, though, they definitely have cooled way down. Miami, like you can see it in the data, has stayed significantly more robust. And so is that really like maybe 2 years of pent up international buyers who had to wait for a while? Is that maybe what's helping things right now?
No, you know what? I don't think so. And I'll tell you why. Because what happens, especially with South America, when a country is doing poorly politically in South America, that's when we see the influx of people. So right now, I mean, it's incredible. You see Argentina going through turmoil, and guess what? The U.S. offers really great stability. Even if our interest rates are not, we think they're not as favorable or whatever happens, you know, for them it is. You know, we're
Yeah.
seeing a lot of Colombians, we're seeing a lot of Chileans. So Miami kind of depends on political unrest in the rest of the country, which is crazy.
Which
And
is
guess
crazy,
what?
but it turns out to be very reliable.
No, 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 for
It's-
sure. And that's exactly it. So there's a big joke that Miami is close to the U.S., where we're like in the border of the
Close to the
U.S.
U.S. That's right. It's really nice because it's very close, South America, but it's very close to the U.S. That's terrific. And yeah, and it turns out that if you're at home in a country with political turmoil, you know your interest rates are 14% or something. You know, coming to the U.S. is like it's still very cheap.
Correct.
That's neat. Okay, that's really fascinating to watch that trend. Um, and so the market's been solid this year. Um, and have you noticed change since the beginning of the year? So, for example, in the rest of the country, pretty dramatically, markets slowed down. Rest of the country, in some of the boomiest, West Coast markets, available inventory is back over where it was pre-pandemic. Most of the country, it's still very low, but Austin and Phoenix and those places is back up. But after the first of the year in much of the country, we've had a notable change. Inventory is falling, buyer demand is picking up. It's surprising that folks are buying in spite of the new interest rates. What are you seeing since the first of the year?
Listen, we're seeing something very similar. So definitely inventory slowly going up, not to pre-pandemic numbers, but we're seeing inventory going up. What we're seeing is not the multiple offer crazy bidding war scenarios. That's gone. So that's out of the way. So we're seeing, we did see a slowdown, and we were talking about a few colleagues a couple of days ago about this. What's interesting from that slowdown is like, oh wow, interest rates are 6%. And we're thinking, that's still a great interest rate. Yeah, of course, it wasn't the 2.5 that we were lucky to get a couple of years ago. But the reality is, if you bought at 2.5%, oh my God, just pat yourself on the back and just say your timing was on point. But the reality is, those buyers that were holding back because they were freaking out at interest rates going up, they're now realizing, wait a minute, it's not as bad, 6%. And then when you have an appreciating market like Miami offers, then you need to do the numbers, right? So if historically we're appreciating at 8% and interest rates are at 6, you better buy now. Because if you wait till the end of the year thinking that the interest rates are going to drop a point, you may lose out on a great opportunity. So that's what we're seeing. And then we're seeing sellers being more flexible. So that's positive. And my point of view is now we're seeing a little bit longer inspection periods. We're seeing some seller concessions. So the market is normalizing. And a joke that I tell my agents when they're like, wait a minute, I've had this listing on the market for 30 days. I'm like, okay, no, now you have to be an agent. Now you got to market the property. You didn't have to market in the last couple of years. It was easy. It was pie. Now you have to go back to working. So it's not negative by any means, but to me it's like, oh, we're going back to normal. It's fun.
Yeah, that's great. That's a very optimistic way to look at it.
Well, thank you.
But having certainly those like crazy overbidding times and the multiple offer things, like it's not healthy for anybody in the market, and so it has definitely returned. So let's so then when we've been talking about obviously the out of town buyers, South American turmoil, are those patterns? Do they change? Have they changed post pandemic? Are there new trends that we should pay attention to there? What about Russia? Russia money, does that matter? How should I think about those?
It's funny. My Sunny Isles office is so diverse. I think the other day we had a training and we had Russians, every country in South America was represented. So we had Portugal, we had French, Chinese, Korean. So I was looking around the room and I said, oh my God, this is awesome. This really represents Miami. So with that said, my agents represent and service all kinds of people from all over the world. I can tell you that yes, Russia has always been interested in Miami. I don't think we've seen a crazy just overflow, or I don't see more movement from Russia. We've been seeing more movement from the countries in South America with turmoil. Is it different than before? I don't think so. What I'm seeing a little bit different this time is that these foreign nationals that would buy cash, they're still buying cash, don't get me wrong, but now they're not afraid of leveraging their money. So now there's more foreign national programs out there in the lending industry. And now they're thinking, wait a minute, let me leverage my money here in the United States because they trust the US ultimately. So that's the only thing that I would tell you that I see that's a little bit different.
That's interesting. So there's actually more lending programs for foreign nationals that have emerged recently.
Correct.
Oh, that opens up the market more for those folks. So somebody who's coming from Chile or someplace who has some money but not enough to buy a place full cash.
Or more fun than that. Hey, listen, I have $500,000. Instead of selling them one property, you say, let me sell you 3, and you leverage the money.
Wow, that's interesting. And does you see a lot of that kind of activity? So suddenly they're investors in Florida?
Oh yeah. A lot. Sure.
And Florida, in Miami, especially a few years ago, had a couple decades ago, had real building booms, right? And then has had boom and bust cycles on construction. Yeah. Where are we in that phase right now?
So it's funny because a lot of people you're always going to reference 2008. as the bust. But I can tell you, there was a lot of media channels also covering, there was way too much new construction inventory. And the reality is that it wasn't. A lot of media channels were covering 25 years of inventory. And the reality, it was like less than 5. Um, but since we've been seeing a boom in new construction, to the point where a media channel gave me some quotes about, oh no, because construction is down in South Florida. And I was like, no, no, please send me the stats, because absolutely not. There's all kinds of developers, all kinds of projects. Anything that's new construction is selling fast. Anything that's new construction in the single family or townhouse arena, there's not enough of it being built. It's selling like hotcakes. So yeah, we're seeing a lot of new construction, a lot of cool architecture here in Miami coming up. We're seeing those cranes again, and it's, listen, it's exciting and not at the same time, because we see the skyline shifting so quickly, and hopefully there's more quality than anything else. But you know me, my architecture brain, I can really pick them apart really fast.
Yeah. Do you like the general trend of the what's being built architecturally?
Yeah, listen, for the most part, yes. And probably I'll have a couple colleagues kill me. Arquitectonica is one of our big firms that is always building. So a new building goes up, who designed it? Arquitectonica. And you're like, oh, Jan, I know that building. But the reality is, yeah, I would tell you that most of the time they're great quality. They have a good reputation. I think more importantly than that is the developer and the quality of the construction that people are concerned with. And everybody that's coming in, we're not seeing a lot of new developers that no one knows. So it's all reputable, all really great quality construction. We're seeing a lot of Airbnb buildings, like short-term rental buildings, where investors can come in, and we'll see where that goes. In my point of view, if there's way too much inventory for short-term rentals, then hey, those rentals may not do as well as we expect. So let's see when those projects are finished, and let's see what the return is for these investors in the short-term buildings.
That's a really interesting thread. There is so I was recently in Nashville, and we stayed in an Airbnb, and the entire neighborhood was like Airbnbs, and you could tell because they all had like the same, Nashville sign on the wall of like, here I am on, and you could see it all the way down in the little townhouses. And so, but Nashville has a big tourist, inbound tourist industry, and it worked great for us. We were 8 people, boom, we had a nice house. It was an excellent way to do it. But on the other hand, what if, recession hits and the tourism drops? Like, do those start to fail? So what do those look like in Miami? Are they like townhouse stuff, or are they like, of those new construction high rises, are there a lot going into the short-term rental?
I would tell you most of them are going to be high rises. So it's, think about it. I mean, you have a 50-story high rise. And what they do is that half of it is hotel, half of it will be short-term rental. They're really flexible. They give owners the opportunity, either you manage it yourself, or we have concierge to manage it for you for a fee. So
Yep.
there's all kinds of different fun and great models. And the math is working out, even with figuring out vacancy rates. But again, there's a lot of them going up. I mean, I
Yeah.
know people love Miami, but it gets to a point where, wow, that's a lot of short-term rentals that are being built.
Yeah. And how is the city with that, or the region or the county? How are they with, so a lot of cities are afraid of that and are restricting, and there's a lot of, not allowed to put in short-term rentals. How's Miami doing with that?
So listen, I'm going to put my chairman of the board hat on. We protect property rights. If you buy a property, whether it's single family, whatever it is, we're supposed to tell you, you have the right to do whatever you want with your property. So that's my chairman of the board hat that I should always wear and always speak out on. With that said, obviously quality of life is always a question. So when you have residential single family areas, you're always concerned. Now, this is controlled by the Department of Business Regulation, DBPR, at the Florida level, the state level. So you get your license for short-term rental at the state level, and then each local municipality will have an extra license. Yes, there's communities that are concerned with that quality of life. But at the end, it's a matter of doing it correctly. Miami Beach was the first one that had a huge fines, and it was just crazy. And guess what? We also need to protect our hotel industry in Miami Beach, because at the end of the day, you have this massive hotel industry, and then if you provide at the same time, parallel to that, short-term rentals, then you don't want your businesses to go, upside down. So it's been challenging. But the city, I would tell you, is open to the growth, and we have enough tourism here, I think, to cover everybody. I think it's the unhealthy party house next to you that you're concerned with.
Yeah, right. And sometimes it's the hotel industry who wants to squash the competition.
Yeah. No. There's, and listen, and obviously I don't know the exact regulations that Miami Beach has come up with, but yes, there's licenses and you have to go through processes, and with every right, Miami Beach not only has to protect private property rights, but they have to protect their businesses as well.
Yeah. So at this point, though, you see, we still see boom in short-term rental construction and the investor types who are buying those units as of February of 2023. You still see that momentum.
Oh, for sure. No, that hasn't stopped. That hasn't stopped. And you know what? And it's funny because I see it just in my own office. I have, I don't know, in Avanti, we have about 1,500 agents. In my particular office in Sunny Isles, we have about like 100 and right under 200 agents. And a lot of my agents work with investors, and they work with short-term rentals, and they're doing beautifully. Their business has not gotten affected at all.
That's amazing. That's really interesting to hear. And it's funny, as much as the data has been, national, the trends have been national. We always have our local insights. And it's one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you today, because Miami's really stuck out and it's sort of a different cycle this year, being its own space. So that's really, really fascinating. Let's talk a little bit more about the market before, and then we're going to talk go into like social media and things like that. But let's talk about affordability. How do you, in a world where like, hey, we're putting up 50-story high rise, and oh, by the way, everybody's buying those for short-term rentals. It's hard to buy it for a place to live. What happens with affordability? What is happening? How do you feel about affordability in Miami?
Listen, it's just funny because my own kids, as being millennials and being in that buying stage, we have this conversation all the time. Thank goodness my oldest bought his place. So now he's looking for a single family house. So we can say when a city grows organically, especially one that is like Miami, you're going to push away to the borders, to the outskirts, the local living person, like the working class. And I don't think this is a phenomenon of Miami. I think this just happens to any city that's growing. So we are seeing these growing pains, and they are being addressed. We're constantly, when it comes to advocacy at the local and state level, that's one of our big deals is affordability. And we're constantly trying to come up with programs, for people to be able to afford and stay in Miami. We don't want our brain power, our kids, to move out of our city. And it's a challenge. I'm not going to say it's not. It's a challenge. But at the same time, if you're not afraid of buying, like when my son bought a couple of years ago, he's got incredible equity. Anyone that holds back and continues to rent thinking I can't afford Miami, guess what? You're never going to afford Miami. So I think our job as realtors is to explain that process and to let the consumer know, don't be afraid, and pull, you have the data. The data is what is our annual appreciation in the different micro markets within Miami. And you and I have talked about micro markets and how generalized data, sometimes it's very difficult to analyze. And these micro markets, as soon as you analyze them and you realize, wait a minute, if I would have bought 3 years ago, I would have $200,000 worth of equity. You go, wow, now I can move into a bigger property. So back to your question of affordability, yeah, it's an issue. Yes, it's a challenge. Yes, it's one that a lot, not only politicians locally, but us as a board and an association are trying to grab head on.
Yeah. You don't resent all the Californians coming in and buying up all the properties and driving the prices up?
The Californians, not so much because they're nice. I think the New Yorkers, oh my
Ah,
goodness.
okay. Yeah, it's the New Yorkers' fault. Yeah. Yeah.
No,
The
I am not saying New Yorkers are obnoxious. No, I'm not saying they're obnoxious. We
uh,
love our New Yorkers. We do.
of course. Always, and that's of course the New York phenomenon has been the lifeblood of Miami forever, right? It's driven a
Yes.
lot of Miami forever. So, uh, okay, well that's great, and of course, there has been in over the pandemic, especially there was a real trend of um, or at least there's a headline. I don't know if there was a real trend, but there was a headline of like San Francisco technology, a couple of loudmouth venture capitalists who are like, I'm moving to Miami. And I don't, some people moved to Miami and some really loudmouth VCs moved to Miami. Um, and a lot of it was around Bitcoin and the cryptocurrency market. And for a while there was capital there. Did that impact your business? Like people with a lot of Bitcoin money, was that how, and is that gone now?
You know what? I think the crypto people that moved to Miami, they talked about their crypto, but they didn't buy in crypto. So I think that's the difference. So you can be a loudmouth talking about it and but at the end of the day, the transactions were made in regular transactions,
Yeah.
not crypto. And so no, it did not affect our market at all. Those people, their wealth came from different sources. We have not seen that affect us at all.
No impact whatsoever. Yeah. Um, and do you feel momentum for like technology? Like, does that feel real and palpable in Miami? Is there a
No,
future
listen,
for?
it not only does it feel real and palpable, it's tangible. It's really exciting, because I was involved as an early adopter of social media. I was involved with that tech world many years ago, and I remember to get a tech conference was really difficult, and it was like it was always complained, when are we going to see the light at the end of the tunnel? And now it's just all the startups that are coming in, all the venture capital money that's here. It's super, super exciting. We need to thank Mayor Suarez for that, that whole open arms, come in, how can I help you? Has been just a game changer for us here in Miami. And listen, you and I are techies, I get goosebumps thinking about the tech and all the innovation that's happening here in Miami right now. So that's one of the best things that's happened to Miami in the last couple of years.
That's really exciting to hear. It really feels good to be part of a growth market, growth industry there.
For sure.
Yeah, that's exciting. Well, that's cool, and that's actually a good transition. So, we probably met 17 years ago, something like many years ago, right? It's when we started Altos and we were doing blogging stuff and you created Miamiism.com,
Mhm.
which you still run today. How many people have been able to keep any blog going for 17 years or however many, 18 years? But it obviously still probably drives a lot of your business too. Tell us about Miamiism.
Listen, Miamiism is my child. It's just nuts because when I decided to transition from sales into leadership and partnering with Avanti Way Realty and now being more at the management level, I'm not gonna kill my child. So I'm keeping that one alive. But it's a labor of love. It's evolved throughout the years. It started with how I can communicate with the consumer at a different level. Obviously, SEO was a huge thing. That the fact that Google just loved the blog and new content. I never in a million years thought that I was a writer. But guess what? After you've been doing it for so long, and by the way, and you know this, I never hired anyone to write. Like I write all my blog posts, which is insane. I think back now, think about this, 3 to 4 articles a week for 17 years. That's a lot of content. At least because I have so much content, I have the ability of recycling this content for things that are more local. So or apply more to the time. So labor of love, just cool to see tech change around it, cool to see what social media what people are doing with social media. And then they're like, you're a blogger? Ines, really? You're a blogger? And it's funny for me to even vocalize that. But yes, yeah, I couldn't call myself anything else. And it's been absolutely amazing to learn what my voice is and to learn what my audience wants to see in content, and to understand that marketing aspect of how to sell real estate by understanding an audience. And huge lesson.
Yeah. So tell me about your audience. What do they respond to? What are they like?
So funny enough, it has changed throughout the years. And I think obviously it has changed because of my growth and what I'm writing. There's no blogger that's going to go at it blindly. You have to look at your analytics and see what's being read the most. My articles that are always read the most are my market reports. So Mr. Stats, right here, that's it. I don't care if you're buying or selling. You always want to know how the market's behaving. So those are always doing the best. And then the ones that I have a passion for, anytime there's a really cool architect coming in and I talk passionately about what they're building, what I'm seeing, and how it's changing the landscape. And I think people see my passion in those articles, and those are the most read. And my educational ones, historic homes, materials, what's the right window, what's the right roofing tile for a Mediterranean revival home. I can go on and on and
on. Neat. So do you have some architects that we should pay attention to? Who should I know? Who do you like, architect-wise?
Oh my God, there's and he's not a local anymore. Chad Oppenheim in Miami has done some beautiful buildings, and he's building all over. There's a guy that actually went to with me. His name is Alan Schulman. And what I love about Alan is that he takes historic buildings and he repurposes them, but with the right thought, without destroying the integrity of the building or the architecture. So those two are local ones. And then obviously you have like massive architects that are all over Miami. I mean, Zaha Hadid that passed away recently. We have one of her buildings, her first residential building in the US. It's just absolutely fantastic.
That's a good looking building.
Yeah. Herzog and Demuron. I think my favorite building in Miami is a parking lot, which is like, what?
I love it. Yeah. I don't know that one.
Yeah. So it's 1111 Lincoln, and it's a concrete structure that just gives me goosebumps every time I go. There's no bad angle. I may visit it like once a week, and I can take 100 photos every time I go.
I love it. What a great observation. Like the coolest building is a parking lot. I also love the Schulman who respects that the architectural integrity, because Miami has such a great architectural history and culture but it's also a time to change some of those buildings around, right? Some of those are getting old, right?
Yeah, no, for sure. We have a great project right now that's been a labor of love. It's the Miami Marine Stadium. So the Miami Marine Stadium was built, I think it was in the 80s, by this guy, Candela, who's a Cuban architect that passed away also last year. But during Andrew, the hurricane in the 90s, the city was managing the building, and they pretty much just kind of abandoned it. And then they said it was structurally unsafe. And a bunch of people came up, including the National Trust for Historic Places, and declared it historic, like one of the top 10 endangered buildings in the world. And I was part of that, which I was very, very happy to be. So years, it's been like 12 or 13 years since that process began of not destroying it and maybe restoring it. And they just started the concrete restoration for it last week. So big win for historic
Wow.
restoration.
Yeah, and do you think the city and the region in general does like a good job between that trade-off of, hey, we got to build new, but we also got to protect the old? Is it does Miami do well there, or are there things that need to be improved?
Oh, unfortunately, we don't. We have a couple of passionate people. It's like Miami Beach, I think, is one of the best. The city of Miami is trying to do well. Coral Gables is fantastic. But yeah, there's always people are saying, again, we are protecting property rights. I bought this place. I don't care if it's a historic Keno and Elliott. I'm gonna tear it down. So then Miami Beach like has created like a moratorium for a historic board to review. So there's processes, but we've lost some gems over idiocy at the end of the day, and it makes me sad. I mean, I've written blog posts when like an important house is torn down and I'm crying. And Rick is looking at me like, are you kidding me? Crying over a house that's been torn down. And it's like, yes.
Yeah, that's really, really tricky, and maybe even will accelerate over the next few years because of that age of some of those
Mhm.
properties. It's like we got to replace them, and because of this massive growth happening. Um, so many great things about that learning. Um, what else have you learned from the Miamism and that process uh, that you can share with us?
Listen, I think the process of having a blog that has a really strong audience is that, well, I've learned I'm always positive, so it's not like I'm ever going to use my voice to tear someone apart. I mean, that's something that I would never in a million years do. But I think that having a voice teaches you that you do have a responsibility to educate the consumer on things that they may not be aware of. And that's been challenging because putting things in a light that's healthy without being negative, but at the same time being informational, is very rewarding. One example is one house that got torn down close to me in Miami Shores by a well-known architect, and it was his own home. And the architect that built the house in its place was a good friend. So, and it was hurtful. So I wrote a really great post about how sad the process of replacing what's old with new just for the sakes of replacing without thinking of restoration. But I didn't mention his name. And he called me. Like, I hear my phone, he called me and he's like, "You called me out." I said, "No, I did not call you out." I said, just because you're feeling guilty about the whole process of not educating your client doesn't mean that I'm calling you out. I'm calling the whole process broken. And it's up to you to realize that from now on, you have a choice as an architect to educate the consumer what you're tearing down for the sakes of tearing down.
Yeah. Yeah, it is a real challenge, and it's of course California is very sensitive to things like that, and but it's one of the things that then leads to affordability challenges, and like it's a real double-edged sword in there. Um, Interesting. Uh, so you mentioned the hurricane, and do you have a view on climate change, climate risk? Has your business changed or your buyers? What tell me about how you think about climate risk now?
Listen, it's something that we must be aware of. I think we put a blind eye in anything that was sea level rise of climate change here in Miami for a few years. There were a couple of media reports of actual realtors that would say, "Oh, nothing's happening. You don't have to worry for 50 years." And we need to be responsible. The beauty is that we've reached a point in sustainability in the city where the city officials are being responsible and they see we need to address this. Um, Infrastructure in Miami needs a lot of work. But for example, I'll mention Brickell, our financial district. You see in the news, and I get calls from like South America. Oh my God, I just saw it in the news. Brickell's underwater. And yeah, while we have these heavy rains, it literally is underwater, but it drains in less than 24 hours. It's gone. It's not like it stays underwater. Now, that doesn't mean that's right. It just means it's not as bad as the media is perceiving it to be. So yeah, we have a long uh, trip ahead of us when it comes to being better about sustainability, but we are definitely addressing it. Some of the ways that we're addressing it, in my opinion, are band-aids. For example, there's certain areas in Miami Beach where, and there are commercial areas where the city's racing the street. So you race the street, you keep the actual retail at the same level as before, and they add pumps. But guess what? So you're protecting the car? Is that what you're telling me? The car's more important than the pedestrian walkway that was there before? So we need better urban planners. We need better solutions to these band-aids that I don't think are solving the problem. And it's just very, very temporary. And at the end of the day, I hate to protect the car. I want to protect the walkability. I want to protect those businesses at the end of the day.
Right, right, right. And when you're working with maybe younger realtors, uh, is that something, is climate risk and climate change, is that something you discuss with them? Is it like help them? How do you communicate to, like, well, if you buy on the 50th floor, you're going to be fine. What do you do? What kind of conversations do you have?
Well, the big joke is, yeah, if you buy on the 50th floor, and how are you going to get to the building where there's boats? There's always boats, to get to your place. Um, no, the reality is that the education is, what is your local municipality doing regarding this climate change? What's happening with flood insurance, for example, which is huge. What's happening with these 50s homes, that are sitting in lower grounds, and what needs to happen to those to come up to standards. So there's zoning changes happening throughout. So it's about letting those younger agents know, please inform yourself about what each municipality is doing, and which streets do flood, and what happens, and what the changes are. And that's a responsibility that we all have to have and disclose.
What is happening with flood insurance?
Well, listen, I think the biggest change that I think will be positive is the whole LiDAR mapping idea. So my sister's also an architect, and she was freaking out that her house insurance was going to go up. And yes, it's a problem. Insurance is definitely increasing, especially in Florida. Um, but there's changes right now with mapping to understand exactly how much they flood, where you are within those flood lines, and what a homeowner needs to know and do to protect their property. And that's what's important. I think it's that whole evolution of, again, education, because at the end of the day, that's where it is, and making sure that our local governments are protecting us and are giving us that right information.
That's interesting. And said elsewhere that it feels like Florida is generally, we're underpricing the risk in much of Florida. We still, even though flood insurance is rising, it still feels like we are, the risk is growing and the damage skill is growing. But it's interesting to hear about the technology changes that actually help us make better decisions along the way there. Have you ever had a situation where you tell a client, don't buy this house, buy that house, because we can see how the flood map works better?
Oh, yes, well, absolutely. What I say is, listen, I want you to come back to this area after a torrential rain, just so you see what's happening, and that's an eye opener. That's a huge one. I could not live with myself selling a property and the person can't even go out their front door because their house is flooded. So, but talking about underpricing the risk, insurance is really, really, really high. So I think that the problem that we were having in Florida outside of in the insurance thing, and I think this is going to be a really great solution because it's advocacy at the state level, is that contractors could actually go straight to the insurance to say that they were doing, so they would get paid by the insurance and they would remove the homeowner. So there was a lot of fraud there, so now it's a no. The homeowner needs to be involved in that.
Okay.
And that's to me, it's going to make a huge difference.
It's a huge difference because the less fraud means then you don't have to pass those costs on. Interesting. Okay, I like it. Those are real changes, like the technology changes, the legislative changes, in the face of the fact that the risk is increasing. Like we need to do those mix. All right. Well, that's really terrific. That's exactly what I wanted to get out of our conversation. And as I appreciate your insight, I love Miami is such a special market to see and to hear about. I love your role both as a practitioner, but also as a leader of the 60,000 agents in Miami. Like I really appreciate your time today.
Well, listen, thank you for having me. It was a blast. I can't wait for you to come back to Miami so I can see you live and in person. And thank you for having me. This was really, really a treat.
Ines, where should people find you on the social media? We talked about a bunch of your stuff, but where should they find you?
Listen, everything Miamiism. So on Instagram, I'm Miamiism. On Twitter is my first name. So it's Ines, Ines. So that's the only one.
You're the first Ines.
So that's crazy. So Twitter is Ines, but the rest of the social media platforms under Miamiism, you'll find me.
Terrific. And Miamiism. Yeah, your Instagram is great because you're such a good photographer and capturing the art of the space and the architecture. It's really, really terrific. All right, everybody. That's the Top of Mind podcast. My guest, Ines, chairman of the Miami Association of Realtors this year and a longtime practitioner. Ines, thank you so much. Everybody will be back next week with another Top of Mind podcast.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Top of Mind. If you enjoyed the show, I'd really appreciate leaving a nice review on your favorite podcast app. That helps other people find us as well. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. See you soon.